Welcome to You've Been Owned, the podcast that covers all things cybersecurity, including incidents and what you can learn from them. My name is Gary Perkins. I have the pleasure of serving as the Chief Information Security Officer for CISO Global, the firm that meets all your cybersecurity needs. I'm joined here today by Christina Davidson. We're going to talk about all things continuity and resilience and disasters and you name it. Christina, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yes, so my name is Christina Davidson, and I have a long history in data center management, along with disaster recovery and business continuity and incident management. Lots of things that I've, kind of wore a lot of hats with a lot of companies, I guess. Early on in my career, I started off as the lowly help desk person that was the only one on site, scrambling the run to the data center every time something broke. So then somehow I ended up being the data center manager because I just was the only one that knew where all the bodies were buried.
Back when they asked for volunteers.
Correct. Like that was the only one there. They're like, oh no, the server's down. Christina's the one that knows where that one is. So I just kind of started that role and decided to, help build the company, build the data centers up to be more resilient. And so, of course, the data center always has a disaster. So then there you go. I ended up being disaster recovery manager. And so I've done a lot of that, because a lot of companies don't have that base of a bunch of people to go do a bunch of things. There's usually that one person that knows how to, turn something on. That usually always was me. So, yeah, I've really built my career around that.
All right, you're giving me flashbacks already because I'm thinking about my history, and I feel like until you've slept in a data center, you haven't really blessed it and had emergencies and that kind of thing. Now, I was just presenting at the Continuity Insights Management Conference on Monday, and it was a very unique experience for me because suddenly I am surrounded by all of these business continuity and disaster recovery people. They're a totally different breed, but I like them because you can depend on these people. When everybody else is at their worst, they're there. And if they're doing it well, they're probably kind of cool, calm, collected, that kind of thing. But here's my question to you. In my travels, I find that most companies, they don't have a business continuity plan. They don't have disaster recovery plan, or they don't have one of the two, or let's just say that the number that have both and have tested them on a regular basis is very few. So what are the problems? What could possibly go wrong if you don't have any of these things in place?
A lot of times when these things aren't in place and something actually happens, things just kind of fall apart. People
it's
scramble.
Phone a friend, right? They just call
one for all, everybody kind of just panics. It's like, the sky is falling. People are talking on top of each other. There's no plan. What's the plan? What's the plan? What are we going to do? And then there's like somebody that jumps in, and then there's somebody else that jumps in. And next thing you got 40 people on a phone call trying to figure out what happened. And then there's no business continuity. So they don't know what to do. Even if while the IT systems are trying to pull in disaster recovery planning of some sort, they're trying to scramble to get the system back up and running, the business is scrambling because they don't know when is the system coming back up. What are we doing here? But they
want updates all the time. They want information before it's available.
Because they're worried about legal ramifications, regulatory problems, right? Compliance. They're worried about what is the reputation to the company. How can we keep the business running while we have no IT systems? And if they don't have a business continuity plan, they're going to be scrambling as well. So both sides of the house are going to be scrambling, and they need to really work together, to bring everything back up and not just crash. There's some pretty significant statistics on like the amount of money that a company will lose just in an hour, right? It's pretty staggering.
And that's just the financial. There's brand and reputational damage.
Correct.
Nobody wants to have their critical services and systems with a company that can't keep them online.
Absolutely.
And you see the amateurs when this happens as well, because how many times is it like, well, it's lost power, now it has power, and somebody says, turn all the systems on. And then they get to learn the hard way that the system is meant to sustain or maintain those systems when they're all on. It's not designed to have them all turned on at the same time.
Correct.
And then
There
it
is an
ends
order.
poorly.
There's an
Yeah,
order
yeah.
to things. And people don't know that. Not everybody. You know, there's that one sysadmin, right, that probably knows it, but maybe he's on PTO. And you don't, and there's nobody that really knows which order to bring things up in. I mean, you got to have, you know, power first, and then you got to worry about, you know, Active Directory servers. And next, you know, you're worried about, you know, now people can log in, but everybody wants to log in at once. Now what do? Right? Because there's no storage and there's no, you know, no data. So, you know, you have to figure out and plan for in which specific order these things need to come up in. And in the meanwhile, there needs to be somebody calmly, you know, saying, okay, we're going to have, you know, this is going to take this amount of time, potentially this amount of time, and kind of give the timeline to the business so they have an idea of when people are going to be able to log in and start working again, right? And what they can do to plan, you know, do they need to notify the public, right? Do they need to notify, you know, do they make a public announcement that the, you know, systems are offline? You know, example would be like the website, maybe the website's down. They need to put a banner up that says, hey, we're unavailable. Please check back in the next hour.
Yeah, that's when everybody starts to think it's a cyber attack. But it is important that you have these kinds of rules and things in place. But here's what I find. I find that if companies that haven't learned the hard way, they may have a document that's designed to pass audits and things, but it actually hasn't been exercised or tested. You know, what's the benefits of doing some of these exercises, even if it's a tabletop?
Benefit is that you have a well-oiled machine. The more you test, the better the chances you're going to not run into a roadblock along the way. You're going to find things during that testing. You're going to find things and that help you understand how to bring the system up faster. Maybe you have a bottleneck somewhere in your backups, or maybe you have a failed backup and you didn't even realize it. Because if you didn't test, you never would know, right? Like maybe you didn't have monitoring up on that server, and it's been, you know, not down, but like maybe say the backup wasn't running properly. And you didn't know it. You didn't have monitoring on it. Nobody was paying attention. And so if you don't test, you're going to find that out in the middle of a disaster.
I've seen that one.
Right?
The look on their face when they go to recover or restore from backups, and the backups are either corrupt or non-existent or something's gone wrong. That look on their face, they thought they had backups, and it is not going to happen for them.
Yeah. So maybe they didn't have, you know, enough data to make an actual backup, right? You know, like an actual recovery of a server. Maybe they didn't do a snapshot at the last time they did a patching. You know, because that does happen. They go and they patch and realize that, you know, oops, you know, I've just destroyed the server in some fashion. And, you know, they go to recover it from backup because they didn't have a snapshot, and then the backup is corrupted. So all of those things happen in real time. And if you don't test on a regular basis, you don't find those gremlins that are hiding.
I like that. I like to think of gremlins in my network. Don't feed them or get them wet. It's like, so what happens then? Do you have any stories for when folks haven't followed the rules exactly? Because the rules are there for a reason, right? We rely on these things that folks are going to follow them, but if they don't, well, we get to learn again.
And this one
why they're there.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a story that is, you know, really comical, and it was not actually due to a disaster recovery plan, but it is pretty funny. So, you know, I had moved on to a different position, and I get a call that the backup data center is offline, and everybody's panicking. And, you know, it's all monitored, so it's mostly remote. But there's like the one guy that, you know, keeps the lights on over there. And one day, you know, he decided to not follow the policies. You know, he just decided that, you know, but I was no longer there, and new management was in place, and this is a dumb policy. I don't need to follow it.
What was the policy? What did it require?
So it was that the maintenance on the generator that is ran, you know, by a contractor has to have somebody with them at all times.
Yeah, 2 people, right?
2 people in the box,
yeah,
right?
That makes sense.
You know, making sure that, you know, we nothing happens, right? The guy doesn't get electrocuted doing maintenance on the generator. He doesn't, you know, fall and trip, and nobody's there,
These
right?
are there for a reason.
They're there for a reason, but the guy thought it was a waste of time to, you know, hang out with this other guy for 3 hours while they do generator maintenance. So he left him, and I guess the generator guy, you know, maintenance man has got in a hurry and left the door open, and he took off and left the facility. And so the guy that's working there that keeps the lights on closes the door to the generator and walks away. Well, in that period of time, apparently a possum or some sort of other critter, they believe it was a possum, goes in and eats wiring because they can't get out. He's trying to find a way out. And yeah, it at some point there was some arcage and it backfed to the transformer. And next thing you know, the entire block is out. So this call to me was just, hey, it's out. Well, it wasn't just out. It was completely down power-wise. It took out the entire block.
So I'm having chills here, but I'm also partially in disbelief. You said a possum, right?
Just a possum.
A possum. Okay. It also does feel, I don't want to make light of any animal losing their life, yes, but it feels to me like that probably deceased there or was injured.
Yes.
And it feels like it was probably larger than a rat anyways to chew through this stuff. But wow, a possum. They got to learn the hard way. It's like all Zootopia happening there. The worst I've ever had, I think, is when I've been up a pole fixing phone lines and a squirrel comes running down the line towards you. It's like, wait, you're supposed to be running away from me. Why are you running this way? And where are you going to go? Like, are you going to go down the other side of the pole? Wow, a possum. So I guess they learned the hard way.
Yeah, and they learned that they needed to have robust disaster recovery plans because now you have no backup data center. This was their disaster recovery data center, and it's down. I mean, it's hard down, and they didn't have a second generator. They had one, right?
Yeah.
So it took a week or more. I believe I wasn't really involved in the recovery efforts because I'd moved on, but they were really panicking because they didn't plan for this particular disaster.
I bet. They didn't
for
have
all
an
the
animal,
others, right?
chewing through their cable or a possum. But that's why we have the rules, and it reminds me of another time. Like, people are just trying to get things done for the most part. They want the least amount of friction when they're trying to do it. So I remember standing at a data center, and we were permitted to rack the equipment, but we weren't to turn it on. We didn't have change control in place to do that. So I remember sitting there thinking, well, at least if we plugged in power, then remotely later when we have the approval to turn it on, we can do it through lights out management. We'll be able to enable this thing. So maybe we'll just plug power in, but we won't turn it on. And then we decided to go ahead and do this. And the gentleman went to plug it in, and you hear that sickening sound. Like, you've got it. You have to hear it to know it sounds not quite like snap, crackle, pop. As he went to plug the cable into the power strip, and then all the bays, all the servers went down, power. There was a short. They all went down, and that was like, oh my God, now what do we do? Well, I can tell you what we did. Turn on all the power as quickly as possible. Fortunately, it wasn't the whole data center, but that was like self-induced. That's why we have things like change control. Like, we have a method of procedures that we follow and backup plan. And in there, it was a little bit compressed. That's crazy. In my world, of course, it's the cyber events that happen, and there's almost always an element of social engineering or con artist that's going on, and those are all the ones that are in the media right now. Like, if you hear whether it's an MGM or a similar, people sometimes can be, I hate saying it, the weakest link, because I believe if they're trained, they can be the strongest asset. But it sounds like you've had some experience with some humans and some challenges that have resulted from that as well.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I have an experience where there was a remote customer service agent working at home, gets a call through the line. Hey, I'm from help desk. I can help you. With your system.
Nobody at help desk has ever historically helped anybody. I'm kidding. This social engineering hacker calls in and says, I know your system, and named it, right? So there's they build trust. Yeah, they did the reconnaissance then. A lot of folks, that's when they let their guard down, right? As soon as they know the system. But people have to understand that before they do these things, they don't just randomly call. They're going to do their research first.
Yep, they did their research. They knew exactly what they were looking for, right? So they knew exactly what to do. So in this and it really brings back the element of training, right? Because these types of employees are usually customer service level 1 right out of college, or somebody that is in retirement and wants to take an extra job, and they don't have that forethought or training usually to say, hey, maybe this is not legit, right? Maybe this person, I need to validate that this person really works here. So yeah, they were able to get right into their system. Hey, I'm remoting in. Just click on this link. I'll remote in, and I will do my magic and make your system so much faster. It's going to be amazing. So they allowed it because they thought, hey, I trust this person, right? I trust this person. They know my system. How could they be wrong? And they just gave them the keys to the kingdom and walked away, right? And there were many other tactics that were used. Hey, can I have your personal cell phone number? Because I need to just call you.
Don't tell me they gave it to them.
Oh, of course.
Oh, no.
I'll call you right back. Do you have your personal cell phone? Sure, I'll give you my personal cell phone number, because they trusted them.
And
right?
then see that's the thing. The technical controls of firewalls and things like that, they're not going to stop this.
No.
It's completely phone based.
It just comes down to, if they had had the proper training, they would have seen the warning signs, right? They'd have seen that maybe, just because they knew the system doesn't mean, hey, they called in through the customer service line. Why didn't they call me, call my supervisor? Why did my supervisor not tell me that I was going to get a call today? Maybe if there had been larger controls in place to keep them from just being able to click on the link and download this software, this remote in software, they wouldn't. How
many incidents have started this exact same way? This is why I believe in caffeine. Yeah, exactly. That's usually what happens, right? They weren't paying attention, and they've got a lot of work to do. There's no shortage of things coming down to them. And then they click. And
they click on the link.
And they want to help too.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So.
People want to be helpful. It really comes down to people want to help, and they want to believe and trust. But there really needs to be a trust but verify, and proper cybersecurity training really does help that. It helps them understand all the warning signs. Gives them a way to kind of see things coming before they happen. And I think really, besides the training, they need to make sure that they have security put in place to prevent human error, right? There needs to be some security,
honestly.
right?
I'm going to tell you, the top security minds
MFA
right now
is what comes to mind, right?
We shouldn't be expecting the humans. We should engineer
Correct.
it into the system, assuming that they're going to click and cover for that, because people will always make mistakes.
There's always going to be a human element. How can we prevent the human element from happening, right? We have to protect people from themselves a little bit. Let's put in MFA. Let's make it so that they can't click on that link, and it's going to throw a big red screen up that says,
people love those.
You have done this wrong, right?
You got Dave there clicking that thing 30 times, wondering, why doesn't this open?
Yeah.
And my question from is, Dave, why do you hate our network that much, right?
Well, you have to protect them from themselves, right? Because I will say I've done it too. You get an email, it looks legit. It looks really legit. Like the CEO really did want me to go buy that.
Gift cards?
Gift cards, right?
That's a common one,
That's
too.
a common one. But they'll also, send a text to your phone. And I can think of another story where we got, a mass text that went out to everybody in the company that said, hey, there's a calendar invite, for SharePoint. You really need to just go log in real quick. And it sent to phones. So people went and they clicked on it.
It is
and of course
harder
they
to
put in
see
their
on
password.
phones.
Yeah. So, that element of surprise that people just aren't expecting, right? They said, oh, we just got SharePoint. We just got, Outlook 360, with 365 Microsoft.
Sounds reasonable.
So it seems like, why wouldn't I go and log in with my password and check out this calendar invite? And people were doing it, and they were giving out their passwords. So
the weeks don't go by where I'm not faced with similar examples of that one. And they do them because they still work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
they still work. They're they're not so sophisticated. Everybody thinks, oh, hackers, they're really sophisticated, and they come up with these ingenious ways.
0-day expert. Yeah,
and they do, but those aren't the ones that typically work. for
Well, they
most
may,
companies.
but you don't have to, because the simpler ones will do it, right?
The simpler ones
They're
will
not going to
get
use something
them
difficult when, yeah. Fascinating. So just going back to business continuity and disaster recovery, we talked a little bit about the importance of change management and incident management. Like, I feel like I'm going back through my ITIL Foundations course. But with business continuity, so you got to have a plan, but it's not just for passing audits. It's got to be realistic.
Yep.
You need to review it, what, annually at least?
At minimum, for requirements annually.
Yeah.
I really suggest at least once a quarter, at least for business continuity, because you're not really taking an impact to the business by doing some big DR blowout plan. But from a outage or whatever. But the actual business continuity plan really should be really often, because the business changes. It changes often, especially in a growing company. You're going to have,
especially with mergers and acquisitions. Every
Exactly.
single time one of them comes in, absolutely.
Or maybe they decide to do something different, right? They've got a new software that got onboarded. They decided, hey, this new finance system, we're going to put that in place.
It's always the CRMs, the ERPs.
There's going to be something, right? So you need to evaluate, what the downtime can be, what's the tolerable RTO and RPOs that can be accepted. You want to make sure that you're asking all the right questions of the business. When you really want to do like a new business impact analysis, at least annually, if not more, so you can understand the business, and how it works, and then which systems are most important. And then when you're creating a business impact analysis, and then you got to make sure you're hitting all the different things like financials and things like that. But when you're doing that, then that helps you write that business, analysis. And yeah, when you're testing it, you're going to want to test it often to make sure that you've hit all of them, right? That you've hit all of those business processes that could potentially be impacted.
I just find that, they may have a plan. They've never tested it out there. And it's because when it comes time to do the test, it may have been booked long in advance. But either you lose the key players, you lose the executive, or people are just like, I've got real world troubles to work on. They never have time for this thing. I don't know what the trick is to getting them there, whether it's donuts or how do you trap them, surprise. I don't know. I don't know. But testing it obviously is really, really important, not just reviewing the document and making sure it's current. Like, how many times you open up a document and you see people in there that aren't even with the organization anymore?
Mm-hmm. And also, these documents can be long and really boring when they're written for compliance. You don't need 125 pages for a document to tell you what to do. You really need to make it short and sweet.
I'll be honest, I like to have both. I have the one that's...
You got to have one for compliance, and you got to have the shorthand.
The one, that when things are on fire, this is the one we go to, and it's like, do this, call this person. But yeah, I mean, regularly testing them for both business continuity, but also disaster recovery. Now, it's tricky. Like, the number of companies... I want to say they're in good company when they don't have all these plans and tested, but I don't think that is good company to be in. If it's important to you, you should not just have the plans, but you should have tested them and taken the learnings, because there's, as you said earlier, there's always learnings.
Something to learn, yeah.
And build them back into the plan, and then next time you're testing that, and inevitably you're going to find something else. So
yeah, you're going to do a retrospective of some sort, right? Bring everybody together, say, hey, okay, what went well and what went wrong? And how can we prevent this next time? Like, maybe it's because you don't have a software that will help announce to the company that, hey, don't come into work today. There's a tornado potentially coming in. You would have that as a finding, right? And then, but you're not always going to act on those findings. Some of them you may be like, if that's a business risk that we're willing to take. It's all about what you got to balance, right? You can't be extreme. And I think that's where some companies get bogged down, because they're like, oh, it's going to be super expensive. We're going to have to spend all this money to make us resilient. And sometimes it's not. You got to think about the basic things. Maybe we don't need to spend a whole lot of money. Maybe it's just, we tell supervisors to call the employees and let them know. We don't need a mass spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars on some software.
It is true, because the core people that you need to fix it, despite the size of the organization, often can be like 30 people or less, right? But just going back to the plans, I mean, some of the ones I like are the ones where somebody's outside, and when people are coming in that day, they say, you live, you die, you live, you live, you live, you die, and then see if you can work without those, single points of human vulnerability that we have out there. But the other thing is that I want to say about the testing is a tabletop is fine, right? You can do it as long as you have any learnings, then it was worth that time, right? Mm-hmm. So it doesn't have to be this multi-day war games that's going on.
Yeah, it can really literally be done in an hour or two. I mean, you can have very basic scenarios that you run through, as long as they're different each time, so that you kind of learn from them. One time it might be a tornado, we're all going to jump under the table. Let's pretend, you got to make them fun a little bit. Nobody wants to sit and just hear somebody talk about what would we do in the event of a tornado? Okay, we're going to jump under a table. Like, no, sometimes you got to actually jump under the table and have a little fun with it.
It does make it real, right? Then now some guy realizes he can't actually fit under that table. He's not going to go down. That's it, and it's got to be regionally relevant, because the last time I heard about checking for earthquakes was when I left BC, Canada, and came down here, and now they talk about other things that are a lot more concerning to me, but no mention of earthquakes.
Yeah, no hurricanes here in Arizona. We definitely.
Haboobs, though, which is a term I wasn't familiar with.
Exactly, a haboob, and that's a totally different thing. And some of those scenarios are like, okay, we can't go out, we can't leave the building. Nobody can come in and nobody can leave because there's so much dust outside, and you don't want to breathe it, and you don't want to get it in your eyes, and you don't want to send employees home, like you would in the other scenario.
Until you experience it, right? You don't get, like, it was blinding. I'm used to having snow, whiteout, but this was something different, and it went dark. Mm-hmm. It was, anyways. Yeah. I digress. But the last thing I want to talk about is a bit of the reliance on cloud, because it's true that they're so focused in resilience and keeping things up and running that historically, again, rarely it's gone down, but it does. Sometimes it does, whether it's a human error, whether it's AI or something like that, and it does go down. But the thing that concerns me is these organizations, when you ask them, well, what happens when it goes down? And effectively their plan is, we will wait until it's up. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't be long, right? Yeah, but what if it is?
Yeah. And it has happened. It has happened. We rely on the big hitters, right, of cloud, and we believe that they're going to come save. They never go down, and they're going to come save the day. But sometimes it does happen, right? They have had outages, and you have to make sure that you have a contingency plan for that. What if your servers are no longer available? What are you going to do?
Or as I'll make. Won't lie, they were making fun of the IT folks on the conference recently, because for an IT person, they have a redundant server, and it may be in the same room or on the same power strip or up a floor on the same location, and that just doesn't cut it for these folks. And so that's where you really want to leverage, geographical redundancy.
Yeah, and even in the cloud, in your cloud instance, right? You got to make sure that whichever vendor you choose has it spread, right? They're going to provide you whatever you ask for. But if you don't ask for geo redundancy, you're not going to get it. They're going to put it all in one, right? One big bucket
that they made available.
It might be a little bit more expensive in some cases, but it's definitely worth it to make sure that you have spread your data out across multiple regions, based on your business and where your business is. Because you also, if you put your data in someplace like way off on the East Coast, but your people are all on the West Coast, that's great, but also test your network speeds, because that may not work. We failed over your environment over to East Coast because we were doing some maintenance on the West Coast, and now you wonder, why is everybody running so slow? Why is all our systems really slow? They may not even tell you, right? Because the big cloud hitter they're just keeping their business running. So you have to go verify where your speeds are. So don't just put your, everything in one basket and think, oh, well, it's fine. That DR site's, I don't care if it's, a million miles away, because you could run into an issue where they do fail over, your network speeds bog down. And so it's great to have redundancy and protection, but not if it's going to mean that you can't really function as a business.
That's a great place. I know we've run to the end of our time here today, and I really want to thank you for sharing all of your experience with us. It's been fantastic, and I think there's some really good lessons here for folks to follow. And so thanks to everybody for tuning in. I'm sure there's some lessons, some things that you cringed at here today. Thanks to the Next Space and Jeff and the AV team for providing this fantastic facility. And please always stay safe out there.